Nicole smirked, shaking her head as she leaned against the kitchen counter, swirling the wine in her glass. The amber glow from the pendant lights cast a soft sheen over her perfectly manicured nails. "Relax, babe," she purred, her tone laced with amusement. "You always come back." For too long I had swallowed the late nights, the half-hearted excuses, the lingering scent of someone else's cologne on our sheets. I had convinced myself that patience was a virtue, that love meant endurance, that the history we shared was enough to outweigh the undeniable truth. But tonight, as I stood in our too familiar kitchen watching her smirk at me like I was a joke she had long since stopped finding funny, something inside me shifted. I saw her for who she was, who she had always been. She thought I would never leave, that no matter how far she pushed, I would always find my way back, tethered to a love that had long since decayed. I had been her anchor, her safety net, the fool who absorbed every betrayal in silence. But not anymore. Nicole didn't notice the difference in my stance, the way my shoulders had relaxed, the quiet certainty in my expression. She mistook my silence for another surrender, another unspoken agreement that I would stay. She turned away, sipping her wine, humming some song under her breath, already dismissing whatever she assumed I might say next. She didn't know that I had been planning this for weeks. While she was out, draped over another man, thinking she had the upper hand, I was making my escape. I had moved the money, found a new place, packed everything I owned with calculated precision. Piece by piece, I had stripped my presence from this house, from her life, from the world she assumed she controlled. I was ready. She would go to sleep tonight believing everything was as it always was. She would wake up expecting breakfast, a peck on the cheek, the continuation of our twisted routine. Instead, she would find a hollow shell of a home, the closets emptied, the drawers bare, my presence erased. And when she called, 'cause I knew she would, I wouldn't answer. Let her sit in the silence. Let her understand too late that she had finally pushed too far. The night felt different, not because Nicole had done anything unusual. If anything, her routine betrayal had become so predictable that it had lost the sting it once carried. But tonight was different because I knew it would be the last time I'd ever have to endure it. I had spent years tolerating the lies, the subtle gaslighting, the way she would feign innocence even when caught red-handed. But tonight, I wasn't playing the role she had cast me in anymore. Nicole had left earlier in the evening, slipping into a black dress that was just a little too elegant for a simple dinner with the girls. She had barely glanced at me as she walked past, her perfume thick in the air, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she sent a last-minute text. She had mastered the art of deception, but I had learned the art of observation. She thought she was untouchable. She believed she could manipulate reality itself, bending my perception to fit her narrative. But what she never considered, what she never even entertained as a possibility, was that I had stopped listening to her words a long time ago. As soon as the front door clicked shut behind her, I moved with precision. There was no hesitation, no doubt. I retrieved the suitcase from the hall closet, the same one I had quietly filled over the past few weeks, making sure not to leave so much as a wrinkle out of place to arouse suspicion. My clothes, my documents, my valuables, everything that mattered to me had been gradually disappearing from this house, unnoticed by the woman too preoccupied with her own affair. I walked through the bedroom, the one we had once shared before it became nothing more than a cold arrangement of convenience. The bed still carried the faintest scent of her perfume, mingled with the traces of someone else, a reminder of just how thoroughly she had desecrated what we once had. I felt nothing as I stood there, taking one last look at the space where my love had once lived. It had died a long time ago. The closet doors were already half open. Where once my suits had hung in neat, methodical order, there was now only empty space. I reached for the last few remaining items: a wristwatch, a pair of cufflinks, a book I had left on the nightstand. Small details, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But they were mine, and I was taking everything that belonged to me. From the dresser, I took my wedding ring, the same one I had stopped wearing months ago, and set it carefully on the pillow she would lay her head on later that night. It was a symbol of what she had taken for granted, of what she had tossed aside without a second thought. Let her see it. Let her understand what it meant when she realized she was truly alone. I moved through the house like a ghost, my footsteps silent against the hardwood floors. Every object I passed carried memories, but none of them held power over me anymore. The framed wedding photo in the hallway, I left it hanging. Let her see the past she had shattered. The kitchen where we once made late-night snacks together, laughing over burnt toast and spilled wine. Now, just another room in a house that had lost its warmth. By the time I reached the front door, my bags were packed, my keys in my hand, my mind utterly at peace. This was not a dramatic escape, not some desperate plea for freedom. This was a controlled, calculated departure. She had expected a fight. She had assumed I would rage, argue, demand explanations. But I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I would leave her with silence. With one last glance around the empty home that had once been ours, I opened the door, stepped out into the cool night air, and pulled it shut behind me. No slamming, no theatrics, just the quiet, irreversible sound of closure. Nicole would come home to a house stripped of everything except the consequences of her choices. She would check her phone, expecting a message from me, a question, an accusation, something. But there would be nothing. I was already gone. Nicole entered the house with the same air of confidence she always carried, heels clicking against the polished hardwood floor. The evening had gone exactly as she had expected. She had laughed, flirted, enjoyed the thrill of knowing she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. In her mind, Daniel would always be there, waiting, forgiving, playing the ever-loyal fool. She kicked off her shoes in the entryway, sighing as she reached up to remove the diamond earrings Daniel had bought her years ago, back when gifts like these still meant something. They were little more than accessories now, tokens of his unyielding devotion, proof that no matter what she did, he would always find a way to love her. But something was off. The air in the house felt hollow. Usually, even in the silence, there was a sense of presence, a lived-in warmth that came from knowing someone was there, from hearing the soft hum of the television in the next room, or the faint shuffle of Daniel's movements upstairs. But now, the house felt unnaturally still. She furrowed her brows, setting her earrings down on the console table as she walked toward the living room. The sight that greeted her sent the first uneasy ripple through her chest. The bookshelves, always neatly arranged, with Daniel's collection of novels and business journals, were empty. The coffee table, usually home to his favorite leather notebook and a stray coffee cup, was bare. Nicole's stomach tightened. She turned sharply, heading toward the kitchen, half expecting to find Daniel standing there, maybe waiting to confront her, maybe just watching her with that quiet, unreadable expression he had mastered over the years. But the kitchen was just as empty. The air smelled faintly of wood polish and lavender cleaner, but there was no sign of Daniel. No briefcase on the counter, no neatly placed keys in the dish by the door. A cold prickle ran down her spine. "Daniel," she called out, her voice carrying through the house and coming back to her with an eerie emptiness. No answer. Nicole's steps quickened as she made her way upstairs, pushing open the bedroom door, expecting, hoping, to find something that made sense. Instead, she was met with absence. The closet doors were wide open, revealing vacant shelves where Daniel's suits and shirts had once hung in perfect order. The drawers where he kept his watches, cufflinks, and ties were pulled out, empty. Even the space beneath the bed, where he kept his small leather duffel bag for business trips, was bare. Her gaze swept over to the nightstand, her breath catching at the sight of something small and metallic resting on her pillow. His wedding ring. Nicole's heart pounded violently in her chest as she rushed to the bathroom, yanking open the cabinets. The glass shelves, once lined with Daniel's cologne, shaving cream, and neatly folded towels, were stripped bare. She stumbled backward, her breathing coming too fast, too sharp. He was gone, not in the way she had always assumed he might leave. After a fight, after a heated argument where she pushed too far, only for him to storm out and return hours later, exhausted and defeated. This was different. This was planned, calculated. A departure without warning, without theatrics. Her hands trembled as she pulled her phone from her bag, scrawling frantically through her messages. There was nothing from him. No calls, no texts. Just a gaping void where his presence used to be. She dialed his number, pressing the phone to her ear, pacing the bedroom in frantic circles. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. "Daniel, what the hell is this?" Her voice was sharp, demanding. "Where are you? Call me back." She hung up, fingers tightening around the phone as she tried again and again. Every time, it went straight to voicemail. Nicole's breath shuddered as she leaned against the dresser, trying to steady herself, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling inside her. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't how things worked. Daniel always came back. Daniel always stayed. But as her gaze flickered across the empty room, the stripped-down remnants of what used to be their life together, a sickening truth settled deep into her bones. He wasn't coming back. A single sheet of paper caught her eye on the kitchen counter as she stumbled back downstairs, heart hammering against her ribs. She rushed toward it, her fingers curling around the note as her vision blurred with panic. There were no long explanations, no emotional outpourings, just 4 words, written in Daniel's steady, deliberate handwriting. "You were wrong, Nicole." The paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering onto the counter as her knees buckled beneath her. For the first time in years, Nicole felt powerless. Nicole sat motionless on the kitchen stool, the note still lying on the counter where it had fallen from her trembling fingers. The words, so simple, so final, stared back at her, sending an unsettling chill through her chest. She had always assumed she had control over the way Daniel felt, over his reactions, over his willingness to endure. He had always stayed, no matter how much she pushed, no matter how many times she lied. And yet, tonight, she had come home to an empty house and a silence so thick it felt suffocating. She grabbed her phone again, gripping it so tightly her knuckles turned white. She dialed Daniel's number once more, her breath uneven, her mind screaming that this couldn't be real. Straight to voicemails. "Daniel, enough of this," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Where are you? You don't get to just disappear." She ended the call and immediately opened their text messages. Her last message from him was from that morning, a simple "have a good day" that now felt like an eerie farewell. She typed furiously, "Nicole, call me, now." No response. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she started typing again, the anxiety clawing at her throat. "Nicole, you're being ridiculous. Stop playing games." Nothing. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she pressed the send button again. "Nicole. Daniel, where the hell are you?" She watched the screen, waiting, praying, for the little gray typing bubbles to appear. But they never did. The realization began to creep in, slow and insidious, curling around her like a vice. Daniel wasn't ignoring her to prove a point. He wasn't waiting for her to apologize, wasn't testing her patience. He was gone. And this time, it wasn't temporary. A cold, sinking sensation settled in her stomach. She jumped up suddenly, pacing the kitchen as she tried to grasp what was happening. This wasn't how things worked. She had spent years perfecting the art of keeping Daniel where she wanted him, balancing the right amount of dismissal with just enough affection to keep him tethered to her. But he had unraveled the strings she had wrapped around him without her even realizing it. Her breaths came in short gasps as she grabbed her purse, rifling through it until she found her car keys. She would find him. He was probably at a hotel, maybe at his friend Aaron's place. Daniel wasn't impulsive. He was methodical, logical. If he left, he had a plan, and she needed to know what it was. She rushed out of the house, her heart hammering as she climbed into her car. The night air felt too cold, too sharp against her skin. She barely noticed as she pulled out of the driveway, gripping the steering wheel until her fingers ached. Aaron's house was only 15 minutes away, and she broke every speed limit getting there. Her hands shook as she rang the doorbell, shifting impatiently from foot to foot. When the door finally opened, Aaron stood there, his expression unreadable. "Where is he?" she demanded before he could say a word. Aaron studied her for a moment, then sighed. "He didn't tell you?" Nicole's stomach twisted. "Tell me what?" Aaron leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "He's gone, Nicole." "He left." "I know that," she snapped, her patience thinning. "Where is he?" Aaron shook his head. "I don't know. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Her throat tightened. "You're protecting him?" "I'm respecting his decision," Aaron corrected, his voice calm but firm. "You should, too." Nicole felt a rush of anger, mixed with something far more terrifying: panic. She had underestimated Daniel. She had assumed he would always be there, always willing to listen, always willing to forgive. But she had never seen him like this, so completely detached, so final in his actions. "This is insane," she whispered, mostly to herself. "He'll come back. He has to come back." Aaron exhaled, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? Nicole looked at him, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Get what? Aaron's gaze was steady, unwavering. He's finally done, Nicole. He's free. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Free. The very thing she had taken for granted, the hold she had over Daniel, was gone. He had let go. For the first time in years, a deep, clawing fear took root inside her. Because if Daniel wasn't coming back, what did that mean for her? Nicole sat in her car outside Iran's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her nails dug into her palms. The word free echoed in her head, a foreign and impossible concept when applied to Daniel. He had always been steady, reliable, hers. The idea that he had broken away, that he had taken control in a way she had never expected, sent a cold wave of fear through her. Her mind raced, trying to find cracks in what was happening, some piece of logic she could cling to. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe he was trying to teach her a lesson, make her realize she had gone too far. Maybe, if she reached him first, if she just explained, she could fix this. But deep down, a sinking dread whispered the truth. This wasn't a game. This wasn't one of their cycles. Daniel hadn't left in anger, he had left in certainty, and that was far, far worse. Swallowing back the lump in her throat, she turned the key in the ignition and drove home. Though it no longer felt like home. The house stood still and lifeless as she stepped inside, the air thick with the absence of him, the silence pressed against her ears, a stark contrast to the nights when he would be in the kitchen, absently humming as he made tea, or in the living room flipping through a book. She walked through the empty spaces he had left behind, as if by some cruel trick her mind had played on her, only now noticing just how much of the house had been his. The closet wasn't just missing his suits, it was missing the scent of his cologne that used to linger there. The bookshelf downstairs wasn't just empty, it was missing the sound of him flipping through the pages late at night. Even the kitchen felt colder without his warmth, standing by the stove. For the first time in years, Nicole felt the weight of solitude. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone again, dialing his number before she could think better of it. It went straight to voicemail. She closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her forehead for a moment before trying again. Nothing. She switched to texting, her fingers moving too fast, her desperation leaking into every word. Nicole, Danielle, let's talk, please. No response. Nicole, where are you? We can fix this. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then hours. She stared at the screen, waiting for the read receipt that never came. The panic built in her chest, curling into something raw and unfamiliar. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He had always needed her. Even when he had been upset, even when she had pushed too far, he had always come back. But he wasn't coming back. The weight of that realization crashed over her like a tidal wave, dragging her under, leaving her gasping for breath. She stumbled toward the bedroom and sank onto the bed, staring at the empty space beside her. The same bed where he had once looked at her with devotion, with trust, with a love that had been too easy to take for granted. Had she ever truly loved him? Or had she only loved the way he stayed? A broken sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She wasn't the type to cry, wasn't the type to feel this. But as the hours stretched into dawn and she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the truth settled into her bones. She had spent years believing she was the one in control, that Daniel would always be there, always bending, always forgiving, but she had never considered the possibility that one day he would simply walk away. And now that he had, she had no idea who she was without him,